I should have worn gloves. That was the first thing I thought when I looked down at my hands on the white tablecloth. The linen was Italian, expensive, and my hands were clean. I'd scrubbed them in the hotel bathroom 20 minutes earlier, but there was still a faint shadow of grease under my nails and a fresh scratch across my thumb from a panel bracket. They were working hands, and in this dining room in Georgetown, surrounded by senators' aides and lobbyists, they looked out of place. The room smelled like roasted duck and perfume. Crystal glasses clinked. My father, David, stood at the head of the table holding a champagne flute like it was a trophy. His face was flushed. He tapped a silver spoon against his glass. The room went quiet. 30 faces turned toward him. "To my son, Marcus," my father said, his voice loud and warm. "A man who understands legacy. A man who knows that power isn't just what you do, it's who you know." He smiled at Marcus, my older brother, who sat there in his tailored suit, soaking it all in. "Marcus has just secured a position that will shape policy for the next generation," my father continued. "He is the future of this family." Applause moved through the room, polite, restrained, expensive. I clapped too, slow, mechanical. Then my father's eyes landed on me. His smile didn't change, but his voice dropped. "I suppose we should also welcome my daughter, Elena," he said. He gestured toward me like I was a stain on the upholstery. "Elena works in construction, manual labor. She likes to play in the dirt while the adults run the world." He paused. "But we love her anyway, don't we?" Laughter rippled through the room, quiet, sharp. The woman next to me shifted her chair slightly away. My mother let out a nervous laugh and covered her mouth with her napkin. Marcus raised his glass toward me and mouthed, "To playing in the dirt." I didn't flinch. I didn't look down. I just sat there, feeling the heat of it wash over me and then recede, leaving something cold and clear behind. I reached into my purse under the table. My phone was cool against my palm. I unlocked it. The blue light washed over my hand, invisible to everyone else. I opened my banking app and scrolled to the personal transfer list. There it was, a recurring wire transfer, anonymous grant, Sterling Foundation Operating Fund, $50,000, every month, for 3 years. I stared at the number. Then I looked up at my mother. She was picking at her salad, glancing at me with that familiar mix of pity and annoyance. "Try not to sulk, Elena," she mouthed. "It's a party." I looked back down at the screen. I pressed cancel. A confirmation box appeared. "Are you sure you want to cancel this recurring transfer? This action cannot be undone." I pressed yes. The screen refreshed. Transfer canceled. No sound, no fireworks, just a silent severance. I locked the phone and slid it back into my purse. Then I reached for my wine glass and took a slow sip. The wine was excellent. It was the last thing they would ever get from me. I wasn't always this cold. 5 years ago, I was just Elena, the daughter who dropped out of Georgetown Law because I realized I didn't want to argue about the world. I wanted to build it. I remember the day I left. My father stood in the foyer of this same brownstone and told me that if I walked out that door, I was walking out on my legacy. "You're trading influence for irrelevance," he said. "Have fun playing in the dirt." So I did. I moved to Austin with $3,000 and a terrifying amount of ambition. I traded blazers for steel-toed boots. I traded political galas for 110-degree days on construction sites. I founded Solar Edge with nothing but a laptop and a belief that America's energy infrastructure was broken, and I could fix it. The first 2 years were brutal. I lived in a trailer on my first job site because I couldn't afford rent. I learned to read blueprints by flashlight. I negotiated contracts with men who thought I was the secretary. I ate dust, literally and metaphorically. But while my family was sipping cocktails in DC, I was laying the foundation of a new power grid. It turns out playing in the dirt is profitable if you know what you're building. Solar Edge exploded. We weren't just building solar fields. We were redesigning how cities consumed energy. By year 3, we had contracts with 3 major municipalities. By year 4, We were the primary infrastructure partner for the state of Texas. Last month, our Series C valuation hit $410 million. I wasn't just a builder anymore. I was a titan. But my family didn't know that. To them, I was still the failure, the disappointment. And in a twisted way, I wanted to keep it that way. I wanted their love to be real, not transactional. I wanted them to care about me, not my net worth. So 3 years ago, when I heard through a mutual contact that the Sterling Foundation, the nonprofit that gave my parents their social standing, was on the brink of bankruptcy, I made a choice. I didn't let them fail. I set up a blind trust. I became their anonymous donor. I told myself it was noble. I told myself I was being the bigger person. But looking back, I see it differently now. I was buying a subscription to a family that didn't want me. I was paying for the privilege of being their daughter, hoping that if I just kept the lights on long enough, they might eventually look up and see who was flipping the switch. Tonight, sitting at this table, listening to my father mock the very hands that signed his checks, the illusion finally shattered. I wasn't their savior. I was their mark. And the saddest part wasn't that they were using me. It was that I had let them. The dinner continued around me like water around a stone. Politics, gossip. Marcus was holding court at the far end of the table, telling a story about a senator who didn't understand leverage. It's like talking to a brick wall, Marcus laughed. Some people just don't have the capacity for high-level strategy. My mother leaned forward, her diamonds catching the light. Well, darling, that's why you're indispensable, she said. Then she glanced at me. Unlike some of us who prefer simpler tasks, she smiled. Elena, dear, I hope you remembered to wash your hands properly. I swear I can still see grease on your thumb. The table chuckled. I looked at my thumb. The scratch was still there. A thin red line. It's not grease, Mother, I said quietly. It's a cut from a bracket. A bracket? Marcus snorted. Listen to her. She sounds like she's building an erector set. I set my glass down. Actually, I said, I'm building the power grid for the entire western seaboard. They stared at me. Just for a second. The truth hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. But then the cognitive dissonance kicked in. I watched it happen in real time. My father blinked. His brain rejected the data. My mother's smile faltered, then reset like a glitching screen. Oh, Elena, she sighed, shaking her head. Always so dramatic. I'm sure your little solar project is very sweet. Sweet, I repeated. 410 million isn't sweet, Mother. It's a valuation. My father laughed. It was loud, meant to drown out the absurdity. 400 million, he boomed. Did you hear that, everyone? My daughter has an active imagination. Perhaps she should write fiction instead of playing with construction equipment. They couldn't see it. They physically couldn't see it. If I wasn't the failure, then Marcus wasn't the golden child. My father wasn't the patriarch. If I was the titan, then they were just expensive pets. Their egos protected them from reality like a blast shield. I'm not imagining anything, I said, leaning back in my chair. But since we're talking about finances, Marcus, how is the consulting firm doing? Still waiting on that big contract? Marcus stiffened. These things take time, Elena. You wouldn't understand. High-level negotiations aren't like digging ditches. No, I agreed. Digging ditches actually produces something. The air in the room shifted. My father's smile vanished. That's enough, Elena. You are a guest at this table. Act like one. A guest, I said. That's an interesting word for the person paying the mortgage. My mother dropped her fork. It clattered against the china, a sharp, violent sound in the hushed room. I looked directly at my father. Enjoy the wine, Dad, I said. It's the last bottle I'm buying. They stared at me, confusion fighting with outrage. They still didn't get it. They thought I was being rude. They didn't realize I was being literal. The blindness of the elite is a fascinating thing. They're so accustomed to the lights staying on, they never think to look for the generator. But the generator just quit, and it was about to get very dark in here. The tension in the room was brittle, ready to snap. Then the double doors at the far end of the dining room swung open. The sound was heavy, final. Heads turned. Vanessa stood in the doorway. Vanessa, Marcus's fiancée, looked nothing like the composed DC socialite she usually was. Her hair was slightly askew. Her cheeks were flushed. She was still wearing her coat, breathless, like she'd run all the way from K Street. She was clutching her phone like a lifeline. Vanessa? Marcus stood up, his face shifting from annoyance to relief. Finally. We were starting to worry. The toast is over, but... Quiet, Marcus, Vanessa said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the room like a siren. She wasn't looking at him. She wasn't looking at my parents. She was looking at me. Her eyes were wide, filled with a mixture of terror and awe. She walked slowly toward the table, ignoring the confused murmurs of the guests. She stopped directly across from me, her hands gripping the back of an empty chair. I just got off the phone with the board, she said, her voice trembling. The Texas grid deal is stalled indefinitely. My father scoffed, annoyed at the interruption. Vanessa, darling, we're in the middle of a celebration. Business can wait. No, David, it can't, Vanessa snapped, her gaze never leaving mine. Because the person holding up the deal, the person who owns the proprietary technology we need to move forward, the person who just red-flagged our environmental compliance report, is sitting at this table. The room went dead silent. You could hear the hum of the wine fridge in the pantry. What are you talking about? My mother asked, her voice shrill. Elena works in construction. Construction? Vanessa let out a short, hysterical laugh. She pointed a shaking finger at me. Do you know who this is? Silence. This isn't just your daughter. This is E.R. Sterling, the founder of Solar Edge, the woman who built the Nevada solar array, the woman who personally negotiated the infrastructure contract for the entire state of Texas last year. She paused. She's not a construction worker, David. She's the titan who is currently deciding whether my firm survives the quarter. The cognitive dissonance in the room shattered. I watched it happen. My father's face went slack. My mother's hand flew to her throat. Marcus looked between Vanessa and me, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. That's impossible, Marcus stammered. Elena dropped out. She lives in a trailer. I lived in a trailer for 6 months, I said, my voice calm, filling the silence. 4 years ago, while I was building the first grid. I looked at Vanessa. I saw the compliance report, Vanessa. Your firm missed the groundwater impact study. Fix it, and I'll sign off Monday, but not a moment before. Yes, Vanessa breathed, nodding rapidly. Yes, Miss Sterling. Thank you. I'll handle it immediately. Miss Sterling, my father whispered. The name tasted foreign in his mouth. He looked at me, really looked at me. And for the first time in his life, he didn't see his daughter. He saw power, and he was terrified. The shift was violent. The air in the room didn't just change, it inverted. 5 minutes ago, I was the embarrassment. Now I was the most dangerous person in the room. The guests were staring at me with naked hunger. The senator's aide was already reaching for his phone, probably to Google E.R. Sterling. I took another sip of wine. You were saying something about manual labor, Dad? He didn't answer. He couldn't. The hierarchy had flipped, and we all knew it. My father laughed. It was a weak, fluttering sound. Well, he said, smoothing his tie, trying to recapture the authority he'd lost moments ago. That's quite a revelation, Elena. 400 million. Very impressive. He turned to the guests, his smile tight. See? I told you she was special. A Sterling through and through. Building empires runs in the blood. Stop, I said. It wasn't a shout, but it cut him off instantly. Don't do that. Don't rewrite history. 5 minutes ago, I was a manual labor mistake. Now I'm a sterling. We're family, my mother interjected, her voice trembling. Of course we're proud. We just didn't know. You didn't know because you didn't look, I said. But you knew about the money. What money? Marcus asked, confused. The Sterling Foundation, I said. The nonprofit that pays for this house. That pays for your lifestyle, Marcus. The foundation that was bankrupt 3 years ago until an anonymous donor stepped in. My father went pale. That donor was me. Silence. It was a wire transfer, I corrected. From my personal account. $50,000 a month. For 36 months. I paused. Do the math. A gasp went around the room. Vanessa looked at me with horror. You funded them? She whispered. You paid for all of this? I thought I was saving them, I said, looking at my parents. I thought if I kept you afloat, you'd eventually find your footing. I paused. But you didn't. You embezzled it. That's a lie, my father shouted, slamming his hand on the table. Is it? I pulled my phone back out. I have the audit report right here. You used charity funds to pay the mortgage on this brownstone? You used it to pay off Marcus's gambling debts in Vegas last year. You used it to buy the car sitting in the driveway. I looked at him. That's not just unethical, Dad. That's fraud. The word hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Fraud. I didn't know, my mother whispered. David told me the investments were paying off. He lied to you too, Mother, I said. But you let him, because the lie was comfortable. I looked around the table. The truth, that your daughter was the only reason you weren't on the street, was too painful to accept. This is the illusion of power. They had built their entire identity on having the house, having the status, having the connections. But they were nothing. Their power was a rental, leased with my money, and the lease was up. I canceled the transfer tonight, I said, my voice final. The money is gone, the foundation is insolvent, and the authorities will likely be auditing the books by Monday. My father slumped into his chair, a deflated balloon. The arrogance was gone, replaced by the terrified realization of a man who has been exposed. Elena, please, he rasped. You can't do this. We'll lose everything. You already lost everything, I said. You lost your integrity. You lost your dignity. I stood up. And worst of all, you lost your daughter. I smoothed my dress. I looked at Vanessa. I'll see you Monday, Vanessa. Bring the revised compliance report. I will, she said, her voice filled with respect. I walked out of the dining room. I didn't look back at the table, at the crystal, at the people who had claimed to love me only when they thought I was useful. I walked out the front door of the brownstone, down the steps, and into the cool night air. The silence of the street was beautiful. It wasn't empty. It was full of possibility. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with air I didn't have to buy. I hailed a cab. Where to? The driver asked. The airport, I said. I have a city to build. I didn't block their numbers. I didn't have to. Silence is a language my family understands perfectly, especially when there's no longer a wire transfer attached to the conversation. I left D.C. that night and flew back to Austin on a red-eye. I watched the sun rise from 30,000 feet, painting the clouds in shades of gold and violet. It looked like a blueprint for a new world. The fallout was quiet, predictable, and absolute. Without my monthly grant, the Sterling Foundation was insolvent within 60 days. The auditors found the embezzlement. My father managed to avoid jail time, barely, by liquidating his assets and pleading ignorance, a humiliation that hurt him far more than a prison sentence ever would. The brownstone in Georgetown was sold quietly to a tech lobbyist to cover the debts. My parents moved to a small condo in Virginia. I hear my mother tells people they downsized for retirement. They still lie. But now, the lies don't cost me a cent. Marcus's consulting firm folded when the Texas grid deal fell through. Without the prestige of the family name, backed by my money, his high-level strategy turned out to be nothing more than hot air. He sends me an email once a year, on my birthday. I don't open them, I just archive them, a digital record of a brother I used to know. Vanessa, however, surprised me. She left Marcus 3 months after that dinner. She kept her job, fixed the compliance report, and is now one of SolarEdge's most reliable partners. We aren't friends. That would be too complicated. But we are colleagues. And in the world I built, competence is the only currency that matters. I stood on the roof of the new SolarEdge headquarters this morning. It was early, the air already thick with the heat of the Texas summer. Below me, the city was waking up. I could see the steel skeleton of our new solar array stretching out into the desert, thousands of panels tilting in unison to catch the light. My father called this playing in the dirt. He meant it as an insult. He meant that I was beneath him because I created things with my hands instead of manipulating them with my words. But standing there, feeling the hum of the grid I built, I realized he was right. I do play in the dirt. Dirt is where foundations are laid. Dirt is where you plant the seeds of the future. Dirt is real. I adjusted my hard hat and checked the time. My team was waiting. I didn't need a toast in a Georgetown dining room to know who I was. I didn't need their approval to know I had value. I was the architect of my own life. I had designed a structure that could withstand the weight of their rejection, and I had built it strong enough to stand on its own. They built a house of cards. I built a power plant, and the lights are never going out again. 6 months after that dinner, I received a letter. It arrived at my office in Austin, hand-delivered by courier, expensive stationery, my father's handwriting on the envelope. I held it for a moment before opening it, not because I was nervous, because I was deciding whether it was worth my time. I opened it. The letter was 3 pages long, handwritten, carefully composed. It started with an apology. He was sorry. He hadn't understood. He had been blinded by pride. He had failed me as a father. He wanted to make amends. He wanted to meet. There was a phone number at the bottom, a new number I didn't recognize. I read the letter twice. Then I set it down on my desk. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel vindication. I felt nothing. That was new. For years, I had carried their rejection like a weight. Every dismissive comment, every sneer, every time they looked through me instead of at me. But now, reading my father's carefully crafted words, I realized something. They had no power over me anymore. Not because I had conquered them, because I had simply moved on. I picked up my phone and called the number. He answered on the second ring. "Elena," he said. His voice was quieter than I remembered. Smaller. "I got your letter," I said. "Thank you for calling. I wasn't sure you would." "I almost didn't." Silence. "I meant what I said," he continued. "I want to apologize. Properly. Face to face, if you'll let me." I looked out the window of my office. The city stretched out below me. Clean lines, order, systems that worked because I had built them to work. "Why now?" I asked. "Because I was wrong," he said, "and because I lost something I didn't know I valued until it was gone." "What did you lose?" "My daughter." I let that sit for a moment. "You didn't lose me, Dad," I said quietly. "You never had me. You had a version of me that fit your narrative, the failure, the disappointment, the one you could point to and say, 'At least we're not her.' That's not—" "It is," I interrupted. "And the moment I stopped fitting that role, you couldn't see me at all." He was quiet. "I'm not angry," I continued. "I'm just done. You taught me something valuable, actually. You taught me that family isn't about blood. It's about respect. And you never respected me. I do now. Because I have money." "No." "Yes," I said. "You respect the valuation. You respect the contracts. You respect E.R. Sterling. But you don't respect Elena. You never did." Silence on the other end. I'll meet with you, I said. Once, because you asked, but not to reconcile, to close the door properly. I understand, he said, his voice heavy. Next Thursday, 2 p.m., my office. Bring Mother if she wants to come. Leave Marcus at home. Okay. And Dad? Yes? Don't expect forgiveness. Expect clarity. I hung up. Thursday came. My assistant showed them in at exactly 2 p.m. My father looked older, grayer. He was wearing a suit, but it wasn't tailored like it used to be. It hung on him slightly wrong. My mother looked nervous. Her hands were folded in her lap. She kept glancing around the office like she was trying to memorize it. I gestured to the chairs across from my desk. They sat. I didn't offer them water or coffee. This wasn't a social visit. Thank you for coming, I said. Thank you for seeing us, my father replied. I'll be direct, I said. I'm not interested in rebuilding a relationship. I'm interested in establishing boundaries. My mother flinched. My father nodded slowly. I've moved on, I continued. I have a life here, a company, a team, a purpose, and none of it involves you. That's not cruelty. It's reality. We know we hurt you, my mother said, her voice quiet. We know we were blind. You weren't blind, I said. You chose not to see. There's a difference. I leaned back in my chair. For 3 years, I funded your entire lifestyle. I kept you afloat. I could have told you it was me. I could have demanded gratitude. But I didn't. Because I wanted to believe that you loved me for who I was, not what I could provide. I paused. And you proved that you didn't. We do love you, my father said. You love the idea of me now, I corrected. Now that I'm successful, now that I'm useful. But when I was just Elena, the dropout, the construction worker, the one playing in the dirt, you were ashamed of me. He didn't deny it. I'm not here for an apology, I said. Apologies are cheap. I'm here to tell you that I'm drawing a line. You can exist in your world, and I'll exist in mine, but they don't overlap anymore. What does that mean? My mother asked, her voice breaking. It means no calls, no visits, no attempts to insert yourselves into my life. If there's an emergency, you can reach me through my lawyer. Otherwise, we're done. That's so cold, she whispered. No, I said. Cold was mocking me at a dinner party. Cold was apologizing to your guests for my existence. This is just boundaries. My father looked down at his hands. We failed you, he said. Yes, I agreed. You did, but I didn't fail myself, and that's the part that matters. I stood up. The meeting was over. They stood too, slowly, like they were hoping I might change my mind. I didn't. I walked them to the door. Goodbye, Elena, my mother said, tears in her eyes. Goodbye, I replied. Not with malice, not with pain, just with finality. They left. I closed the door behind them, and I felt nothing but peace. I didn't watch them leave. I walked back to my desk, sat down, and opened my laptop. There was work to do. A contract to review. A site inspection scheduled for tomorrow morning. An investor call at 3. Life continued. That's what closure feels like, I realized. Not a dramatic ending, not a triumphant speech. Just the quiet ability to return to your work without carrying someone else's weight. 3 weeks later, I got a call from Vanessa. Elena, she said, I need to tell you something. Go ahead. Marcus came to my office yesterday. He wanted to talk about getting back together. I said nothing. He told me he's been reflecting, she continued, that he realizes now how much I brought to the relationship, that he wants another chance. What did you say? I said no. Good. But then he asked me to put in a word for him. With you. I leaned back in my chair. He wants a job? I asked. He wants a meeting. He says he's changed, that he understands now what real work looks like. He thinks he could be an asset to Solar Edge. I was quiet for a moment. What do you think? I asked. I think he's desperate, Vanessa said. His firm is gone, his reputation is damaged, and he's finally realizing that the world doesn't owe him anything. That's not the same as being ready to work. No, she agreed. It's not. Tell him no, I said. Politely, but firmly. I'm not interested in charity hires, especially not from family. Understood. And Vanessa? Yes? Thank you for asking. Not for Marcus. For yourself. You're thinking strategically. That's good. I learned from the best, she said. I smiled. We hung up. That evening, I sat on my balcony with a cup of tea. The city was lit up below me, a grid of light and energy. Some of it was mine, the panels I'd installed, the infrastructure I'd designed, the systems I'd built. But most of it belonged to other people, other companies, other dreamers who were also trying to make the world work better. And that was fine. I didn't need to own everything. I just needed to know I had built something real. My phone buzzed. A text from my site manager. Inspection done. We're ahead of schedule. Grid goes live Monday. I typed back. Good work. See you at the launch. I set the phone down. Ahead of schedule. That was rare in this industry. It meant my team was functioning. Systems were working. People were doing their jobs without drama or chaos. It meant I had built something sustainable. Not just a company, a structure. Something that could stand on its own, even without me. A month later, I got a voicemail from my mother. I didn't listen to it right away. I let it sit for 2 days. Then, on a quiet Sunday morning, I played it. Her voice was soft, uncertain. Elena, it's me. I know you said no contact, and I'm respecting that. I just wanted you to know that your father and I are doing okay. We're adjusting. The condo is small, but it's ours. We're learning to live within our means. She paused. I also wanted to say that I'm proud of you. I know I should have said that years ago. I know it doesn't mean much now. But it's true. Another pause. I won't call again. I just needed you to hear that. Goodbye, sweetheart. The message ended. I set the phone down. I didn't cry. I didn't feel angry. I just felt tired. Tired of the weight of their expectations. Tired of the ghost of a relationship that never really existed. I deleted the voicemail, not out of spite, out of necessity. I had built a new life, and it didn't have room for ghosts. 6 months after that, I was at a conference in Denver. Energy infrastructure, policy, innovation. I was on a panel about sustainable grid design. Afterward, a woman approached me. She was in her mid-30s, professional, confident. Miss Sterling, she said, I just wanted to thank you. Your work in Texas inspired our team in Colorado. We're implementing a similar model. That's great, I said. If you need any consulting support, my team would be happy to help. Actually, she said, hesitating, I wanted to ask you something personal, if that's okay. I nodded. I read an article about you last year, about how you started Solar Edge, how you left your family to build something on your own. She looked down. I'm in a similar situation. My parents don't believe in what I'm doing. They think I'm wasting my potential, and I keep trying to prove them wrong, but it's exhausting. I looked at her, really looked at her. I saw myself 5 years ago. Stop trying to prove them wrong, I said quietly. She blinked. Stop trying to prove them wrong, I repeated. You'll never win that game, because the goal isn't to convince them. The goal is to build something so solid, their opinion becomes irrelevant. She stared at me. You can't earn respect from people who are determined not to give it, I continued. You can only earn it from yourself, and once you do that, you'll realize you didn't need theirs in the first place. Her eyes filled with tears. Thank you, she whispered. I handed her my card. If you need advice, or just someone who understands, reach out. She nodded and walked away. I watched her go, and I realized something. This was the point. Not revenge, not validation, but helping someone else find the door I had found. I flew back to Austin the next day, The flight was smooth. The sky was clear. When I landed, I didn't go to the office. I went home. My apartment was quiet, clean, organized. I made tea. I stood by the window and looked out at the city. The grid hummed below me. Steady, reliable. I had built that, not alone, but I had started it, and it worked. I thought about my father's letter, my mother's voicemail, Marcus's request for a meeting. I didn't feel anger anymore. I didn't feel hurt. I just felt separate, like they were characters in a story I used to tell myself, a story I didn't need anymore. I took a sip of tea. It was warm, simple, perfect. This was enough. The apartment, the work, the quiet. I didn't need a family that saw me as a project or a disappointment. I had built my own foundation, and it was solid. The next morning, I went to the office early. My assistant greeted me with a smile and a stack of messages. "Busy day?" I asked. "Always," she said. "Oh, and there's someone waiting in the conference room. She doesn't have an appointment, but she said it was important. She drove here from El Paso." I paused. Did she say what it was about? "She said her name is Carmen. She said she's trying to leave a family business, and she heard you might understand." I looked at my assistant. Then I nodded. "Give me 5 minutes, then send her in." I sat at the conference table and waited. The door opened. A young woman stepped inside, mid-20s, nervous, determined. She had a folder in her hands. "Miss Sterling," she said, "thank you for seeing me. I know you're busy." "Sit," I said. She sat. "I'm Carmen Ruiz," she said. "My family owns a logistics company in El Paso. They want me to take over, but I don't want to run their company. I want to build my own." She opened the folder and slid a document across the table. "I've been working on this for 2 years, a sustainable freight routing system. It reduces emissions by 30% and cuts costs by 20%. But my family says it's a waste of time. They say I should focus on tradition, on legacy." She looked at me. "I read about you, about what you did, and I thought, maybe you'd understand." I looked at the document. The numbers were solid. The model was innovative. She had done her homework. I looked back at her. "What do you need?" I asked. "Advice?" she said. "Or maybe just permission. Permission to walk away." I leaned back in my chair. "You don't need my permission," I said. "You need your own. But I'll tell you what I learned." She leaned forward. "Family loyalty is important," I said. "But self-respect is more important. You can't build someone else's dream and expect to feel whole. You'll just end up resentful or invisible." I paused. "If you walk away, they'll call you selfish, ungrateful, a disappointment, and that will hurt. But you know what hurts more? Looking back at 50 and realizing you spent your entire life trying to earn approval from people who were never going to give it." She nodded slowly. "I can't fund your project," I continued, "but I can connect you with people who might, and I can tell you that it's possible to leave, to build, to survive." Tears welled in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "Don't thank me yet," I said. "Thank me when your system is live and running." She smiled, a real smile, full of hope and terror and determination. I recognized it. I had worn it myself once. She stood, shook my hand, and left. I sat there for a moment after she was gone. The conference room was quiet, but it didn't feel empty. It felt like the beginning of something. Not for me, for her. And maybe that was the real point of all of this. Not building an empire, but showing someone else that it's possible to build their own. I went back to my office. I opened my laptop. There was a new project proposal waiting for review. A solar array in New Mexico. Ambitious, complex, exactly the kind of challenge I loved. I smiled, and I got to work. The lights stayed on. The grid hummed. And somewhere in El Paso, a young woman was probably drafting her resignation letter, just like I had done 5 years ago. The chain breaks one link at a time, and every time it does, the world gets a little brighter. If you've ever had to walk away from people who couldn't see you, drop a comment. Let me know where you're listening from and what time it is right now. I'd love to know who's part of this community. And if this story resonated with you, hit that like button and subscribe. There are more stories like this one. Real people, real decisions, real consequences. Two of the most popular ones will pop up next. I think you'll find them just as grounding. Thanks for listening. And remember, you don't need permission to build your own foundation. You just need the courage to start.